Latin America, there's an amazing tradition of scary tales, and there's a lot of movies have been made about them, and I would certainly love to do a scary story from Colombia.
Un saludo, seguidores de Última Hora Call. Me encuentro con los responsables de El Exorcista Creyentes, de David Green como director y Jason Blum de la popular casa productora Blumhouse como productor. Vamos a hablar un poco acerca de la película.
Exorcista Creyentes.
Start with a simple question. How do you scare people in 2023?
With a lot of hard work. It's harder to scare people now than it was.
I asked this question because the first film came out like 50 years ago, and one subject that made it successful was that the exorcism was like a new thing for films. And 50 years later, we have a lot of films with exorcism. So I would like to know, how can you tell this subject to make it feel like actual, like current for audience of 2023?
Well, we certainly were influenced and inspired by so many technical and creative elements of the Friedkin film. That was 50 years ago, as you say, and we've dealt with a world that has seen a lot of exorcism movies. And you can look at a horror film and think, oh, maybe they've been desensitized and heard everything and seen everything. But we're trying to make a very entertaining movie that has new themes within the old themes. Like if Max von Sydow would step on the stage and perform his exorcism, well, we've got an ensemble of variety of spiritual beliefs and trying to open it up to those concepts of seeing how different perspectives would take the concept of a possession or a negative entity in someone and how they would approach that from a spiritual perspective or a medical and clinical perspective. We also have a synchronized possession, which in my research was really fascinating to me, to think of one entity possessing two people and how that would open it up to a variety of perspectives because of their families and communities.
I'm from Colombia. I have to ask this. Have you been interested in making a film about pre-Columbian culture or Colombian culture?
Yeah, I mean, they're in, not just in Colombia, but in Latin America, there's an amazing tradition of scary tales, and there's a lot of movies have been made about them, and I would certainly love to do a scary story from Colombia.
Yeah, and this one thing about telling the story about good versus evil from different perspectives of different like religions. It was like a really cool thing for me. But in 2023, we can find people who are not close to religious institutions. So how can you tell this fight between good and evil without the institution? Like, it is necessary?
Well, it's also one of the most emotional threads, I think, in the movie is we greet a character that has stepped away from religion and has no belief and has stepped away from the community of his church after the death of his wife. And so part of it, I think, is the questions that we ask ourselves. We look inside and we can say, hey, there's nothing nowhere, or we can say what is above and what is beyond. And I've not come across too many people that don't have that curiosity. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is a movie that asks those questions and brings those conversations into play long after the movie's over.
Yeah, and one thing that I love about this movie was the makeup. I found that it was like a really similar vibe between the makeup of this film and the makeup of Linda Blair. This was on purpose, or how was the process of making this makeup?
Absolutely. Every department had their inspiration and influence from the original film, but Christopher Nelson, our makeup artist, who very closely studied the work of Dick Smith, who did the work with Linda on the original film, and trying to ask ourselves what made that so effective. When you see so many Exorcist movies, why do those images feel so striking? And we just came to the terms that it felt like a real illness, felt like something you would see in a clinical journal. And so being able to take those inspirations and update those a little bit with some modern technologies and find our way into that story, but keeping it really relatable.